Hello and welcome to Thursday Debate with Taghreed Hussein here on Nile TV International. Well, tonight a very special topic and a very distinctive guest as well. Today we'll be talking about the African Union spearheading Africa's development and integration in close collaboration with the African Union member states, the regional economic communities and African citizens, with the AU vision accelerating progress towards an integrated, prosperous and inclusive Africa at peace with itself, and also playing a dynamic role in the continental and global arena, effectively hence driven by the accountable, efficient and responsive Commission. Hence came the importance of establishing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and the election of a Secretary General taking the helm of maintaining the tough missions that he is entrusted with. The African Union therefore elected a well-experienced, well-reputed, a prominent diplomat to carry out such a huge responsibility, Mr. Wamkele Mene, and we're really honored and pleased here on Nile TV International to have this exclusive with Mr. Wamkele Mene, who is the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat. Excellency, thank you so much for coming to Nile TV International. We're really pleased and honored to have you. And there were very fruitful discussions with His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. We all know quite well that His Excellency was very much keen on following up the different measures undertaken for launching the African Continental Free Trade Area. And you followed up on the important fruits in the latest meeting with His Excellency the President.
Yes. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I had a very good conversation with His Excellency the President. We talked about the African Continental Free Trade Area, the hopes and vision of the entire continent to make sure that we have an integrated market on our continent, and to make sure that we reduce barriers to trade, that we reduce barriers to investment, and that we ensure that as we build a common market on the African continent, we make a contribution to boosting intra-Africa trade, and also a contribution to improving infrastructure on the African continent. I took the moment to congratulate His Excellency the President on all of the developments in Egypt in the last few years, particularly in the area of infrastructure. Remarkable progress has been made, and this is the type of infrastructure that is required in order to be able to boost intra-Africa trade. And as you said, most of this progress towards the implementation of the agreement, towards the ratification of the agreement, happened when His Excellency the President was the chairperson of the African Union Assembly of Heads of States. And so we have a lot to be grateful for Egypt's leadership, for the progress that was made leading up to the day that we actually launched, the 1st of January 2021, we launched the Free Trade Area implementation.
Yes, definitely the agreement is considered to be a promising start towards continental integration in Africa. And we can call it a dream coming true.
Yes, absolutely. It is a dream come true. We've been waiting many years, decades, for this moment where we can actually say the whole of Africa, all of us around the African continent, we are trading under the same rules, we are trading with the same objective. This is something that our founding fathers and mothers laid out a vision in the Organization of African Unity, laid out this vision of an integrated Africa. And on the 1st of January 2021, we have made that vision a reality. However, much work lies ahead to make sure that the benefits are concrete. We have many challenges to overcome. We all know that market integration is not easy. It's a very difficult task, and it takes many years of disciplined implementation of our objectives of market integration.
Yes, His Excellency the President had affirmed Egypt's full support for the activities of the AFCFTA agreement, and also how it is representing a promising start, and how Egypt is fully prepared also to actively provide its expertise in that respect.
Yes.
So let us know more about the Egyptian expertise and hands-on concerning the agreement.
Egypt has a lot of experience in trade negotiations, in investment facilitation, in trade facilitation, in foreign policy in general. And so we will benefit as a Secretariat a great deal from Egypt sharing expertise, sharing information, sharing know-how with the Secretariat and of course with other countries on the African continent. And so the President made an offer to me that Egypt stands ready to provide technical support, to provide experts to be seconded to the Secretariat to help us with this enormous task of implementing the AFCFTA. I'm very grateful also because the first Director of Trade in Goods in the Secretariat is Egyptian, Mohammed Ali, will be joining us on the 15th of February to help us, as I say, in this enormous task of implementing this agreement. So already with the appointment of Mohammed, you can see that we are already making use of Egypt's expertise in the area of trade and trade diplomacy.
Yeah, great news, Your Excellency. And tonight a very distinctive guest, and we're talking Africa, the Africa that we aspire. Egypt is fully prepared to provide its expertise in order to activate the free trade zone, and the President highlighted the importance of the stability factor also in the success of this agreement. I'm very honored to have with us on the debate exclusively His Excellency Wamkele Mene. Your Excellency, Nile TV has prepared a profile on Mane's march and choice for this huge responsibility. May God bless you and your efforts in that respect.
Thank you.
And let's watch together. Let's watch.
The African Union Assembly of Heads of State and Government during their 33rd Ordinary Session held from the 9th to the 10th of February 2020 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, demonstrated the determination to take rapid action to effectively operationalize the Africa Continental Free Trade Area by electing its new Secretary General in the person of Mr. Wamkele Mene, who is from South Africa, for a 4-year mandate. Wamkele Mene is the first Secretary General of the African Continent Free Trade Area Secretariat. Wamkele was born and raised in Uitenhage, Eastern Cape Province. He attended Marymount High School before changing schools and enrolled at Trinity High School. He graduated with a BA Law from the Rhodes University. He obtained an MA in International Studies and Diplomacy from the School of Oriental and African Studies and an LLM in Banking Law and Financial Regulation from the London School of Economics and Political Science. He previously served as the head of mission to the World Trade Organization for South Africa. Wamkele later chaired the Committee on International Trade and Financial Services at the World Trade Organization. He was the Chief Director for Africa Economic Relations in South Africa's Department of Trade and Industry and South Africa's lead negotiator in the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. The Secretary General is expected to provide leadership and technical support to the AFCFTA Secretariat and overall management of the day-to-day functioning of the Secretariat. He will be responsible for the management of the AFCFTA Secretariat, implementation of the AFCFTA Agreement and strategic collaboration, stakeholders' engagement, and resources mobilization for the implementation of the AFCFTA Agreement, among others. Mr. Wamkele Mene noted during his swearing-in ceremony that this is a period of unprecedented challenge to the global economy and the multilateral trading system on which the global economy is anchored, underscoring that Africa's response against this strain on the multilateral trading system must be to consolidate and advance the continental market integration objectives through the AFCFTA. He noted that a second challenge to the global economy is the ongoing coronavirus scourge, which has ravaged global economic activities, causing a materially adverse impact on global capital markets, severely disrupting trade and global supply chains, and of course creating a negative effect on global public health. Mr. Mene promised to engage in discussions on this issue with the Commissioner for Trade and Industry and the technical partners such as the UN ECA and the UN CTAD, noting that the AFCFTA should not be perceived to be benefiting only a handful of relatively industrialized countries in Africa, but all African businesses.
Your Excellency, that was a flashback also of the achievements of Egypt during the chairmanship of the African Union. It has been a very fruitful chairmanship for Egypt. A lot has been done, and Your Excellency has congratulated the President on the Egyptian achievements during that time. Tell me more about how did you evaluate the Egyptian chairmanship of the African Union with lots of fruitful achievements happening on solid grounds?
Oh, absolutely. Egypt's chairpersonship of the Assembly of Heads of States and Government was welcomed by everybody. Concrete achievements in the area of reforms of the African Union, in ensuring that the African Union is more efficient in terms of its functions, and that from a budget point of view, that there is better management of resources of the African Union. And then, of course, in my opinion, the most important achievement under Egypt's chairpersonship was the African Continental Free Trade Area. The fact that a number of countries during Egypt's chairpersonship ratified the agreement, signed the agreement, demonstrated clearly the leadership role of Egypt in Africa. And so I congratulated His Excellency the President. And this morning when I had the occasion to meet with His Excellency the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I also congratulated him for the same reasons, of course, of having enabled Africa to say that today we have a free trade area which was born during the time that Egypt was the chairperson of the Assembly of Heads of States and Government.
Yes. Egypt has taken more than one step, lots of steps in the launching of the AFCFTA during its presidency of the African Union. And Your Excellency, you can tell us more about the whole march and also, let me say, the story of success. We call it the story of success until we reach the ratification.
Yes, absolutely. You will recall that Egypt was one of the first countries to sign and ratify the agreement, which again to me is testament to the fact that the government of Egypt is absolutely committed to trade and investment and to integrating with the rest of the African continent to boost intra-Africa trade. We had at that time, there was very, very little, I must confess at that time, there was little hope that the agreement would take off in the short space of time that it has taken off. And so countries like Egypt, like Ghana, like Rwanda, who quickly ratified the agreement, gave it the impetus that was required to take a giant step forward. And so we moved from vision to reality. We moved from dream to action. We moved to concretely taking steps to implement the agreement. And as I said earlier, that all started with the leadership of Egypt. That was 2 years ago. We are now in a different phase of implementation of the agreement. We are now in the phase where, in concrete terms, goods have to move in accordance with the rules of the agreement. Services have to be traded in accordance with the rules of the agreement. It's going to take time. We have to be patient, but this is the nature of trade negotiations. It takes a long time before you actually see the direct benefits of trade negotiations. But we've taken the most important step. We've taken the most difficult step, which was to try to reconcile 55 different economies and try to get 55 different economies to agree on a single set of rules for trade and investment is a very, very difficult exercise. And as Africans, we've been able to do it in less than 5 years. If you look at other parts of the world, if you look at other agreements around the world, it takes much, much longer for them to reach their level of agreement and to express that agreement in a trade pact. It normally takes many, many years. And we as Africans were able to do it, all 55 of us were able to do it in less than 5 years.
Yes. Well, how can we, in your opinion, be able, Your Excellency, to build on what has been achieved? We have already had this challenging march, but however, the dream came true through the sense of persistence, through the sense of consensus, through being together, through having a dream that we need to see materializing and coming true. How can we seize this important opportunity and reach our ambition through the AFCFTA?
I believe that if this agreement is perceived by 1.2 billion Africans to be beneficial only to big corporations on the African continent and only to the connected elite on the African continent, it shall not succeed. In order for us to build on the success that we have achieved thus far, we have to make sure that women in trade, that young Africans in trade, that young entrepreneurs, small, medium enterprises, that they too are part of the benefits of this agreement and that they too are included in its implementation. If we fail to do that, if we fail to implement this agreement in an inclusive manner, it will really reinforce the perception that trade agreements generally benefit only the big corporations. We do not want that to happen. We want to make sure that small, medium enterprises are at the center of benefiting, women in trade are at the center of benefiting. That is how you build on the success that we have had thus far, which is to negotiate a comprehensive trade agreement which brings us together as African economies. But we've got to make sure that the benefits are spread up and down the length and breadth of this continent and also across segments of society on the African continent.
Yes, with this sense of diversification, with this sense of keenness that the benefit would reach the different categories. You've mentioned women in trade, and this is very important, though sometimes challenging, providing incentives and how can we make women quite interested in that. Not that easy also in some communities in Africa. And mentioning the young, because as Your Excellency would know that Egypt is putting the human capital under the leadership of President Sisi at the forefront. So investing in the young, not only in Egypt, but we're talking Africa, and encouraging SMEs. How can we count on that happening? What's your vision to have this translated into action?
We have already started conversations with commercial banks on the African continent about mobilizing resources for a $1 billion $1 billion trade finance facility for small, medium enterprises, particularly those that are led by women, and also for the benefit of young entrepreneurs. We have so much hope that this trade finance facility will enable the connectivity of small, medium enterprises across the African continent, particularly small, medium enterprises that are led by women and young Africans. $1 billion for 1.2 billion people is inadequate. We recognize that, but it is a start. And as we proceed with our discussions with commercial banks, I am sure we will be able to increase that threshold that we have set ourselves of $1 billion for a trade finance facility for small, medium enterprises, women in particular. Second, for young entrepreneurs, we want to make sure that, as I said earlier, that this agreement gives young Africans an opportunity. So that if you are a young tech engineer, if you are a young software developer, you are at the cutting edge of software development for technological, digital trade, that you too have an opportunity to grow your business, to access other markets on the African continent. We know that in the past, trade agreements are very difficult by their very nature. They're very difficult to access for young people and for women in trade. So we want to make it easier for them to access the trade agreement and its benefits. Third, we are in discussions with AFCFTA about establishing a Pan-African payments and settlement platform so that trade on the African continent can be much cheaper, more affordable, can be more accessible and more efficient. And through this payments and settlement platform, you will be able, as a trader, a small medium enterprise, you will be able to transact. You are in Cairo, to transact with a small medium enterprise, your counterparty in Cape Town. You will send Egyptian pounds, they will receive South African rands. Previously, you would have had to convert the pound into the dollar, then transact. The recipient would have to convert the dollar into the rand. And AFCFTA has stepped up and is going to provide a platform for that convertibility to be done in a much more efficient and cost-effective way, thereby reducing the cost of doing business, particularly for small, medium enterprises, the cost for doing business on the African continent. These are some of the concrete steps that we are taking to make sure that the AFCFTA benefits all Africans, small, medium enterprises, women, young Africans, and of course, the big corporations on the African continent.
Yes, the best is yet to come, and the solid foundation is there, the launching is there. Well, a lot of effort has been exerted, and we'll be also discussing with Mr. Mene the role of digital trade. How will digital trade be the next big thing, actually, for the whole continent? Short break, and we'll be back. What is really important also about the agreement, Mr. Mene, is, Your Excellency, is that it is a developmental force for further providing a boost for growth in the continent, and it holds a great promise in that respect. How are we seizing this opportunity?
We have to seize the opportunity in a number of ways. In a post-COVID context, what is clear is that Africa has to accelerate industrial development. We have to accelerate the capacity for Africa to do value addition. We have to accelerate Africa's productive capacity so that when the next pandemic comes, we don't have to rely on global supply chains. We don't have to rely on other countries for critical germ-killing products, as we've seen in this case of COVID-19. So Africa's self-sufficiency and Africa's productive capacity is absolutely critical. Second, our intellectual property regime. We have to make sure that our intellectual property regime is sufficiently responsive to our needs as a continent, our public health needs as a continent, as well as our industrial development needs as a continent. We have to make sure that our patents regime is flexible, that it allows the establishment of a generic drug industry on the continent, that it allows the accessibility of affordable medication on the African continent. All of these things, they go to the core of Africa's development, whether you are talking about industrial development or intellectual property rights or public health. This agreement positions Africa to be able to adequately respond to all of these challenges. And I'm very confident that where we effectively implement the agreement, in the long term, we will achieve our goals.
Yes. More concerning also the contribution into the agricultural as well as the industrial domains in Africa.
Yes. This is absolutely the point. Africa has over 60% arable land, and yet as a continent we are a net food importer. So we've got to make sure that we leverage our agricultural sector for industrial development, for job creation, for the creation of opportunities for young people. We have to explore how we move from an agricultural primary sector to agro-processing, which is a very important pillar of industrial development, and so that we are able to make use of all this over 60–70% of arable land that we have on the African continent. And there are linkages. There are linkages with agriculture, with industry. All of these things are absolutely critical for us to be able to advance our industrial development objectives.
Yes, developing also the continent's economic system as a whole has been also among the top priorities.
The contribution of the African Continental Free Trade Area to a rules-based system, to a rules-based economy on the African continent should not be underestimated. One of the constraints that we have identified on the African continent, a constraint to growth and investment, has been market fragmentation and also the absence of a single set of rules for trade and investment on the African continent. So that when you are an investor in East Africa or North Africa, you are subject to the same rules. This has been absent, and it has added to the cost of doing business on the African continent. And so now that we have introduced a rules-based system, an architecture for and a global governance on the African continent, governance of the structure of the economy, introduction, as I say, of new rules for trade and investment, and introducing incentives for companies to invest. All of this, as part of an economic architecture, has been missing from the African continent. It has been happening in countries and on a regional basis, but we have not seen a pan-African economic architecture that has been introduced to ensure that we have investment across the African continent.
Yes, definitely the agreement is contributing in a way or another to promote the way trade exchange has been done all over the African continent. What sort of promises can we find here? What sort of hopes in this area?
The example of automobiles comes to mind to me every time a similar question is posed to me. We have, in our conversations with investors, with global manufacturers of automobiles, they say to us, we actually want to reinvest on the African continent to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. What has been constraining us is an absence of a single set of rules for investing on the continent. We are now, with this agreement, we are now in a position as automobile makers to shift our production structures, to shift the production of components to the African continent. Not in a single country on the African continent, but across the regions of the African continent. Some regions may want to focus on catalytic converters. Some regions may want to focus on the processing, agro-processing of leather, for leather seats for vehicles. This is an example of how it is possible to create an African or a regional value chain in the area of automobiles. Agro-processing is also another example of how we are now in a position as a continent to create value chains across sectors and across countries. Pharmaceuticals. There are a number of sectors that we can focus on a cross-continental basis because the rules are now clear and the rules are now harmonized. We are now in a position to make a very compelling case to intra-Africa investors and to global investors that Africa is open for business.
Yes. Africa is open for business, and Egypt is open for business as well,
Yes.
with lots of developmental projects taking place all over the country. And I know that Your Excellency did pay a visit to Suez Canal
Yes.
Economic Zone, and you've seen yourself how Egypt today is providing those incentives also for investment, for also encouraging foreign direct investment.
Yes.
Your impressions of visiting the zone, and how do you see, how do you assess the future for the integration, and also for supporting through the different projects happening all over the country?
I think that what I saw, the Suez Canal Economic Zone, is absolutely fantastic. I think that we can model the Suez Canal Economic Zone, can be a model for other countries and other regions on the continent, because there is interconnectivity with ports, with rail, with road, and the production happens at a central point, connected with ports, with roads, linkages. And this is something that is very important, because in order for us to be able to boost intra-Africa trade, we need to have infrastructure. Yes. We need to have infrastructure that supports trade. We need to have infrastructure that enables linkages with other parts of the continent. At the port, we saw there that you can connect from...
Here we can have like excerpts from Your Excellency's visit.
From the visit, yes.
Yes, to the Suez Canal Economic Zone, and as we can hear right now your impressions of this important visit.
So what we saw there is this port is connected with the port of Mombasa and all the way down to the southern part of Africa. There is another part of which is not visible from this footage, but there is another part of the port where there is processing of raw materials, processing of oil, of sugar, refining sugar.
Yes.
And so in my opinion, when we talk about boosting intra-Africa trade and translating the trade agreement into action, this is precisely the type of activity that is required to make sure that we boost intra-Africa trade and that we improve interconnectivity across African countries. I thought that this is a model that we should replicate across African countries, for those countries who don't have it at the moment. That is why we are bringing ministers of trade to Egypt in the next few months, so that they can see for themselves the progress, the significant progress that Egypt has made in the area of facilitating trade. So it was absolutely a fantastic experience.
Visit. Yes. Also the different smart cities in Egypt, the new administrative capital, the new Galala city, and those are also going to be important logistic hubs and are going to link Egypt with the whole world.
That's right. And also the road linkages from Cape to Cairo.
Yes.
The road linkage from Cairo to Dakar, from Cairo to Mombasa. And all of these things start, of course, with the port where we are in the footage here.
Yes.
The smart city we were able to visit today and did a tour of the smart city. And of course there the emphasis is on digital technology, and how digital technology can enable trade and how digital technology can facilitate. Even where you are in a country that is relatively less developed, but if you have digital technologies, you are able to reach global markets, you are able to reach regional markets. I think this is a very important aspect of how we can leverage digital technologies for growth and for trade on the African continent.
Yes, from your words, Excellency, since we're talking digital technology and definitely while thinking AFCTA as your top priority, talking about how will digital technology serve the goals of AFCTA and what's your dreams for the technological implementation? How will it make a difference in your opinion?
We now have an opportunity through digital means, digital platforms.
Yes.
We now have an opportunity to make trade on the African continent more accessible, more affordable. We now have an opportunity to interconnect through a digital platform customs authorities across the African continent so that we reduce the amount of time for customs procedures and we reduce the manual intensive part of trade we shift completely from manually enabled trade to digitally enabled trade through digital platforms that we are going to introduce as a Secretariat. For example, we want to make sure that customs authorities can verify what we call a certificate of origin and do so digitally. Today, if you verify a certificate of origin, that process, that exercise can take up to 14 days. But if you are able to introduce digital enabled platforms, it can happen instantaneously. So we want to shift completely. We want to shift completely Africa's ability to trade from manual to digital platforms.
Yes.
This is how we can prepare our continent for the challenges of the fourth industrial revolution and prepare our continent and enable our continent to be globally competitive. You don't really need to have a high degree of development in order to be able to introduce digital enabled platforms. We know that today, for example, there are farmers of cut flowers who are able to, sitting in an African country, who are able to access markets in Europe using digital enabled platforms. So that tells you already that there is a great deal of potential for us to shift to digital enabled platforms, to shift to platforms that make trade on the continent cheaper, more accessible, and of course efficient. This is something that as a Secretariat we will introduce in the next few months, these platforms that I referred to.
Yes, very promising platforms and important ones because they all serve the solid foundation that we talked about, which is mainly launching the AFCFTA.
Yes.
And definitely the sky is always the limit. But since the launching is happening and we already have this cornerstone and consensus, a lot could be done.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
A very important meeting with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi where the President had affirmed Egypt's full support for the activities of the AFCFTA agreement and seeing eye to eye with the President on how also Egypt could help and provide also technical support, a promising start towards a continental integration in Africa. Let's watch this report and we'll be back.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi discussed means to activate the African Continental Free Trade Area agreement with Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General of the AFCFTA, during a meeting held in Cairo. The meeting comes almost 2 weeks after the official launch of the agreement. al-Sisi during the meeting asserted Egypt's full support for the agreement, which he said represents a promising start to achieve continental integration, as well as the desired economic and trade integration for African states. The head of state said that Egypt is totally ready to offer its expertise in this respect to activate the free trade area. He added that stability is of supreme importance when it comes to providing a befitting environment to make the agreement work. Mene expressed his appreciation for Egypt's keenness to launch the agreement during his chairmanship of the African Union 2 years ago. The agreement establishing the AFCFTA was signed in March 2018 in Rwanda's Kigali. African countries began officially trading under the agreement earlier this month, following months of delays owing to the coronavirus pandemic. According to the Egyptian Foreign Ministry, when the AFCFTA agreement enters into force, it will affect more than 1.2 billion people, with a total domestic product of about $3.4 trillion. Moreover, when operational, the AU says the AFCFTA will be the largest free trade bloc in the world. The agreement is expected to offer jobs for more than 1.5 billion people, with a projected trade exchange worth $3.4 trillion. The AFCFTA is the biggest trade deal in the world in terms of the number of participating countries since the establishment of the World Trade Organization in 1994. According to the African Center for Economic Transformation, the AFCFTA agreement is merging 54 African countries of 1.3 billion people in one market within an economic bloc with a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion. Following years of preparation and a pandemic postponement from its original start date in mid-2019, the world will welcome the largest free trade area since the development of the World Trade Organization by number of participating countries. In brief, the AFCFTA will create a single market for goods and services in hopes of boosting trade among its nations. Africa has historically had low internal trade. In 2017, intra-African exports were 16.6% of total exports, compared with 68% in Europe and 59% in Asia. The agreement will work towards a continental customs union, eliminate tariffs on 90% of intra-Africa goods, aid in the movement of capital and people between countries, facilitate external investment, and reduce non-tariff barriers, like the time it takes goods to pass through customs. AFCFTA has the potential to increase intra-African trade by over 50%, according to the UN Economic Commission for Africa, while the World Bank suggests the agreement could mean an added $76 billion in income for the rest of the world.
As the President said, long live Egypt, long live Africa. And while we are talking Egypt's development, we are talking that all the different domains, the different categories in the society are sharing in building a new Egypt. We're talking about women empowerment. We're talking also about empowering the young with their brains, with their sense of enthusiasm to build. And we're also talking, Mr. Mene, concerning the empowerment of Africa. We're talking about empowerment of women as well. And we were talking about how the agreement can also reflect positively on women empowerment, empowering women in trade, and also empowering the young.
Yes.
What sort of ideas out of the box in that respect from your vision?
Well, first, let me just say that I absolutely share His Excellency the President's big vision. And it's a very big vision that he has for the African continent, for integration of the continent and empowerment of women. We have seen developments in this country for the empowerment of women, remarkable progress. If we don't succeed to make sure that women and young Africans are at the center of this agreement, then, as I said earlier, we're not going to see any benefits that accrue across society. We know that over 70% of Africa's GDP comes from the informal sector and the small-medium enterprises. The bulk of small-medium enterprises are led by women. The bulk of small-medium, of informal sector is women. And therefore, it is absolutely critical that we include women as we implement this agreement, and we make sure that there are new market opportunities that the agreement creates for them, during the Assembly of Heads of States in December, I was directed by heads of states to ensure that we have a protocol on women in trade, a protocol that will be an affirmative action for women and to promote and give women access and opportunities that this agreement will create. And I think that that is something that we have to do with a sense of urgency if we want to make sure that we succeed. Look around the world. There is no other trade agreement that has an affirmative action plan for women to be involved in the implementation and the benefits of the agreement. So Africa is here. By including women through a protocol, we are a trailblazer in the area of trade law by introducing a protocol specifically for women in trade.
Yes, Africa is here, and Africa is here also through the sense of promotion of soft power, reaching all Africans, and through songs and through culture, we can be able also to raise the level of awareness and reach all Africans of the different criteria of and the components of the Africa that we all aspire. Let's watch. Yes, moving towards the Africa that we all aspire. I thank you very much, Your Excellency, Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, the AFCFTA, for joining us exclusively on Thursday debate tonight on the sidelines of your significant visit to Egypt and your meeting with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Thank you so much for coming to this exclusive with Nile TV International tonight.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and we wish you the best of success on your important mission. We wish for Africa all prosperity for the future to come.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, dear viewers, for joining us. That was the daily debate, Thursday debate for tonight, and we had all the honor of having exclusively His Excellency Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AFCFTA. Many thanks for watching.